What's your earliest memory of something out of the ordinary or something that's beyond the ordinary life that people seem to be living around you? Something maybe from when you were a kid.
My earliest, okay, 77, 78. I'm older, so that kind of gets blurred a little bit. But it's somewhere in there. My uncle passing away. My mother's brother, right? My uncle, he's 20-something. And, but he was my favorite uncle. And the whole family was in my house. He was sick with some kind of rare cancer. And they all had, my mom had gone to the hospital. The rest of the family's there. My sister was, you know, my dad and everyone else, grandpa. And my mom comes home and says that Danny has passed away. Right? So I'm a kid in there. And everybody starts crying. And that's my immediate, you know, where I could feel myself welling towards. Right? Tearing up and starting to cry because, you know, someone died. And so everybody's crying, and all of a sudden, just as I was probably about to, I didn't. I started feeling this really intense joy, very intense. And I turn and I look, and there's my uncle standing in the middle of the living room, just lit up. You know, it was him, but just lit up. I don't know how else to put it. From within, there's light pouring out of him. And he told me something to the effect of, there's nothing to worry about, there's nothing to be afraid of, and no one ever really dies. Right? And my mom looks over at me, and she's like, why aren't you crying? I said, I have nothing to cry about. She's like, you just lost your uncle. I said, no, I didn't. He's standing right there. I didn't lose anything. Right? And that was the first really interesting experience. I mean, that's really what started me, I think, because I'm laying in bed. From that age on, I'd go to bed at night, and I would ponder those things, and I would get scared, completely freaked out, because they're beyond the mind. That was so, I was not in my mind when that happened, right? I heard him talking to me, but I more felt it. And then it translated into the mind. It can't conceive of it. So when you're a little kid laying in bed and you're saying things like, what is God? Okay, people die. My mom and dad are going to die one day. Where do they go? Well, who made God? How big is the universe? When did it start? All this stuff is so too big for the mind to even contemplate. It doesn't have enough information, right? And when you're a kid, you know, especially when you're going into those older years from 7 up, you really, I mean, that mind really gets active, really active, right? So it latches onto things that it can't know that way. There's no, the truth isn't in the mind. The mind sees scenes, it sees facts, it understands linear time, but it doesn't even perceive the other half. You know, the half that actually keeps it, that is causing us to be alive. It doesn't see that.
Did you try to ask your parents about that stuff?
Well, when I told my mom that...
Yeah, what did she say?
Oh, yeah, it wasn't good. She was unpleased. I think a little scared. And I think probably at the same time she thought I was a little crazy. You know, I remember riding with her. It was a few years later. I think I was about 12. Right? And we lived in Omaha, Nebraska. Just a Nebraska kid, suburbs in Nebraska. And we were in her car, which was a Corvette, and we were going to buy clothes for me for school at like the fanciest place in town, right? And you know, I enjoyed it, you know, as much as I could, you know, as much as any kid does. I'm with my mom. We're gonna go buy stuff for me, and also I get this feeling coming over me as we're at the stoplight in this Corvette with this car, another kind, almost a Corvette, Trans Am something, right? Of guys in there. My mom's revving it up like she's going to race them. The whole thing goes on for, you know, a quarter of a mile maybe. And it stops. And she looks over, she goes, wasn't that fun? And I said, is that it? Is this it? She's like, what do you mean? I go, is this it? Is shopping and racing and playing around and having a job? And is this all there is to life? Is there more than this? She says, what do you mean? I go, is there more than this? There's got to be more to this than what's going on. She says, you know, you're frightening me. You should watch that. You're frightening me. That's kind of interesting, I thought. You know, me and her get along great. Absolutely fantastic. Because she's come to understand some things. Because it's happened again. I mean, you know, with my grandfather passing away, right? My uncle who I saw in the living room, when his father passed away, I saw him too. And my mom had called me on the phone. He had died in Ohio where he lived. And she calls me on the telephone in the morning. She says, oh, I have something to tell you. I said, yeah, I know. I said, what do you mean you know? I said, Grandpa's dead. He passed away. She goes, she's real quiet. How'd you know that? I said, well, he's sitting across the table from me. I can see him. right? And she's like, I don't need this right now. I don't need you to talk to me like this right now. You know, don't you realize I just lost someone? I said, yeah, don't you realize I'm telling you he's right here? And so we talked a little bit about what she had to go through. Well, it was Ohio, and it was getting on wintertime, so it's cold in Ohio. And I told her, I said, when you're done with hospice and all that, and dealing with the body and dealing with the hospital, when you're done later today, and you walk out of that hospital, you're going to feel a warm breeze on your face. That's your father saying goodbye. And she just kind of, whatever, hung up the phone, right? 2 years later, we're sitting at her house while I'm visiting her in California when she lived out there. And we're sitting at the dining room table, and it's just me and her. Everybody gone to bed. It had to be 1 o'clock in the morning. And she looks over at me, and I could feel it. I could feel her recognition of a higher state of awareness. She steps into that, right? And she said, you know, what you told me about Grandpa? I said, yeah, I remember. So that happened. I said, yeah, I figured it would. He said that's what he was gonna do. You know, and it floored her. I think it floored her. And it's funny because to this day, me and her get along. We are very different people. But there's a heart connection there that it doesn't even have to be spoken about. It's there. Right? I don't need to reinforce it with words. I don't need to, you know, force it. It's just there in existence because of that recognition. That when two people recognize each other in a higher state, that is magic. That is high magic. When one recognizes themselves in a higher state, that's magic. That's why do we call it magic? Magic, to me, the definition of the word is the mind can't figure out what's going on. Good. Let's have some of that. Let's have some of what the mind can't figure out. Because that's the fruit, that's the juice. Right? Because if we're just in the mind all day, you're just living in a mental minefield, basically. There's nothing else going on. You know? And people are feeling this lack of well-being. You know? They don't stay sane. They go sideways. There's all this anger, tension. It's what happens when people don't do that. You know? I know that's way off your question. But
oh, no, it's fine. So you knew early on that adults didn't necessarily have everything figured out. They didn't have all the answers for you. Did that immediately translate into your own mind doesn't have the answers for you too, or was that something?
Well, I think after seeing things that are not part of the belief system most people have, yeah, it kind of made me look at the belief system.
Glitches in the matrix kind of thing? Yeah,
I could see the faultiness in what I was being presented. You know, like Christianity, here's a big one. When I was young, it was me that did it. Because through all this stuff that was going on, right, here's really, I mean, I'll just be flat out honest. And if this means I have to be locked up in an insane asylum, so be it. After all those experiences with my uncle, right, this is but before my grandfather, all these experiences that were very magical, very uplifting, very incredible, this other experience started to happen. And it would only happen in the fall, and it happened for probably 3 or 4 years, in the fall, winter, right? I was a child of the 70s, right, and early 80s. We were what is now referred to as latchkey kids. All of us were. Parents were at work, we'd come home from school, and we'd have the run of the house until they came home, right? And everybody had varying degrees of what could be left out and what couldn't, and how much trouble they'd be in if it was, as it is, right? But I was one of those kids that, you know, I'd come home, my dad would still be at work, my mom would still be at work, and I have 2 older sisters, right? But in the fall, they always had something going on after school stuff, right? Like cheerleading or, you know, whatever it was, drama club, and I never did any of that stuff, right? So they wouldn't be home till like 6 or 7. So everybody would be coming home around 6:30. So after school, I'd go play with my friends. They'd have to go into dinner about 5:30, and then I'd go home on my bicycle. Well, it's dark by now, right? It's at the winter solstice, so it's getting darker earlier, and then time change. Then it starts getting darker even